Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Pansexual Visibility Day. My name is Patrick Dunn, and I am the Executive Director of the New Haven Pride Center. I use he, him pronouns primarily, but respond to everything that is respectful. And I'm here to introduce our panel today that we are hosting. This panel, which we are titled Biplus Health Equity, which actually came out of some conversations being had in our bisexual plus support and social space, which you'll hear more about when Josh is on the screen. Before we begin today's program, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are hosting this event. Even though we are hosting it virtually, all of our panelists including myself, are in various locations throughout Connecticut. So here at the New Haven Pride Center, we were founded and operate on the traditional lands of Mohegan, the Manchetucket Pequot, the Eastern Pequot, the Shattuck, the Golden Hill Pawcatuck, the Niantic, and the Quinnipiac people. Please take a moment to honor the Native people whose lands you occupy and the history of the place you are in. If you'd like to learn more about the Native lands you currently occupy, you can visit native-land.ca. So before we begin, and I hand it over to Josh, I also want to give a big thank you to our sponsor of this event, which is our friends at Connecticut Humanities, who are big supporters of our panels and conversations, our days of actions, and other humanities-centric programs. I also want to give a big shout out to our community partner and sponsor on this program, Circle Care Center down in Norwalk, which also you will hear more from Dr. Rubin when he is on screen. So with that said, I'm going to pass over the baton to our moderator. Before I do that, I just remind you that this is an active conversation that we invite you to be a part of. Please comment, share your thoughts, your questions from wherever you are watching, whether on YouTube or on Facebook, and I will share those with Josh, our moderator, who will then ask them to our panelists. So with that, I am proud to welcome to the stage virtually, Josh O'Connell, longtime center board member, 3-time co-president of the board and champion of bi-programming here at the center. Josh, handing it over to you.
Thank you very much, Patrick. And I need to borrow the what you just said about pronouns. I do use he, him pronouns, but will also accept anything that is respectful. Welcome everybody who's attending today's panel, whether live or watching the recording back later, which is one of the best things about when we do these together. I'm really excited to have this panel with our guests today. And talk about Biplus health equity in its various forms. We have two guests on the panel joining me today. First of all, from Circle Care Center, their medical director for the past 6 years, Dr. David S. Rubin.
Hey.
Very, very pleased to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And also from the New Haven Pride Center, we have Freddie Swindal, who is a case manager. How are you today, Freddie?
Doing good, Josh. How are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you. Sorry, I actually should say your official title, Manager of Support Services. I should get that actually correct. I apologize for that. You do a lot more than that. So thank you both for being on the panel today. And what I want to do is actually start off by talking about each of our various positions within the organizations that we house, as well as sort of what our organizations offer. I think it's important to understand the Biplus community many times feels there's not a lot of resources out there. And, you know, the reality is that sometimes it is challenging to find those resources, but they are growing in number and in scope. And so I think it's really helpful. You know, Circle Care Center doesn't just serve the Biplus community, but it is a part of the community from which they serve, for instance. So Dr. Rubin, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your role there and just Circle Care Center in general and what you offer.
Sure. So our center is focused on the medical care for the LGBT plus community, and we're welcoming to all people actually who require medical care. We focus on sexual health. We have a fairly robust program for the treatment of HIV infection, since I'm a infectious disease specialist and have a history of treating HIV/AIDS through my career in New York City prior to coming to Circle Care. We also offer a very broad sexual health program for protecting against HIV and STDs. We're very proactive in starting PrEP on patients. We also have a significantly large program for treating transgender individuals and helping them with gender transition as well as general medical care. And then we have a general medical and preventive care part of our services, in which we extend our compassionate and our individualized care to any individual coming in, and we suit that to that individual based on what their needs are. So we're really a very general medical organization with, as you can see, certain focuses.
Absolutely. I think that's a good summary, and I appreciate that.
Sure.
Freddie, similarly, why don't you talk about your role at the Pride Center and some of the services that the Pride Center offers?
Sure. So my name is Freddie Swindal. I use they, them pronouns, and like Josh was saying, I'm the manager of support services here. And basically the biggest part of my job is around case management. And, case management is not something that can be really, it really is up to the individual that is seeking out case management. My supervisor and mentor, Juan Carlos, who isn't here today, he always says people will come in and we'll just figure it out from there. But it can kind of look like lots of services around housing, trying to navigate the housing system. We have a food pantry and a community closet that folks can come in and look at. I'm here to help with any mental health resources, like trying to get referrals for therapists, any physical health referrals, which I'm glad that Dr. Rubin, you and I are connecting so that I can refer people to you. Anything like that. I'm here for any like name change stuff for trans folks that want to change their name legally. But mostly I'm here to listen. I'm here to talk through whatever is going on in a client's life, and I'm here to support in navigating the systems to not the saying goes like not only for our people to survive but to thrive. So that's kind of an overview of my job. I'm also in charge of the support groups here at the center, which Josh actually leads one of them, the Biplus support group, and always looking for more to expand those groups as well. So if people have other group ideas, feel free to email me or give me a call, which I'm sure that will provide my contact information. But yeah, that kind of sums it up.
Awesome. And I think you set me up nicely for that transition to discuss sort of my role in all of this. So I've been a volunteer with the center for the last 16 years. I've served on the board of directors for the last 15 of those 16, helped with the fundraisers and all sorts of other things here. And I've run various groups, and the one I currently run is the Biplus Social and Support Group. We are a social and support group in part because there are two other support groups here in the state that exist, one through Triangle Community Center down in Norwalk, as well as one that's run up in Middletown. So to offer a little bit more flexibility, we offer a social and support group. So at a bare minimum, we have a way for people to get to know each other, to network, make friends, very similar to groups I've run with the center in the past with other group types that could use that, such as sort of college age students and so forth, and sort of want to sort of network. And I think the Biplus community in particular struggles sometimes to forge that network. And so that's one thing that I can offer through the group. And as well as working on programs and like this here, and being able to offer some of these programs. And to that end, I do want to note that we do have other Biplus programming that has been streamed in the past, including with Zachary Zane. So please definitely check out those on our YouTube channel, or you can search Facebook in our video library to find those as well. So let's dive right into the topic at hand. So Biplus health is a very broad topic because you have physical health, which of course Dr. Rubin is going to be able to help us with part of that, but also mental health. And so throughout the conversation, we'll be bringing up some statistics and some data points and some, there have been some studies specifically on the Biplus community that have come out in the past few years that have sort of surfaced some concerns about our community and some of the things that they face, which tend to be connected to sort of their lived experiences and things that have happened to them in life that lead to sort of cascading effects on their health, both mentally and physically. So Dr. Rubin, I did want to start with something kind of basic, but I think very important. So one of the studies that HRC has reported is that over a third of bi-plus individuals do not actually even reveal that they are bi to their doctor. As part of their sort of conversations with them. And now you've mentioned, for instance, that you part of what Circle Care focuses on is sexual health. And, not knowing these details can sometimes impact the advice, the care that's given to that end. So can you speak a little bit to the importance of why you're, obviously it can be, people can have concerns about revealing information about themselves, but there can be benefits to revealing that information when it comes to the care that they receive. And so can you talk a little bit about that and the importance of that, especially from your perspective?
Yeah, so one of the benefits of individuals coming here is that a sexual history is a structured part of what we do in our intake. So in a non-judgmental way, we basically will ask that information, and patients coming here generally are coming here for the reason that they're looking for a non-stigmatizing and caring environment. So it tends to be something that is part of our relationship with the patient from the very start. I would imagine most general practitioners, internal medicine people, family medicine practitioners who also may be more time constrained than we are. We allow a lot of time per patient here, which is one of the benefits of coming here too. There's not a lot of time pressure with our visits. But in any case, because of time constraints, may not get to a sexual history. It may be something that's a secondary issue, and the patient then has to bring that information up and may not feel particularly supported in the environment to do that. And as you're pointing out, a bisexual person in particular may feel more stigmatized for all the reasons you're stating. So so that's one of the benefits of coming to our center.
Absolutely. And so, Freddie, with that statistic of more than a third not revealing it, if you look at some of the other parts of these studies, part of it seems to come back to challenges with, trust after being sort of facing biphobia within the community, facing erasure within the community, and so therefore not necessarily feeling heard, and so therefore sort of retracting in, as it were, which I think sort of cascades into things like mental health and physical health. When it comes to sort of what you've experienced, and I'll obviously share mine after you could talk about sort of your experiences. What do you see sort of in your role, and what do you recommend for those who are struggling to trust when they've had sort of negative experiences in the past?
Yeah, I think it's very intimidating to come to an LGBT center. Especially for bi folks, like you were saying, Josh, that have faced biphobia in the community. I think that can be a very, I think it's hard for anyone to ask for help, but when you add this layer of like people within the community denying your queerness and denying that your identity is real, then like it just adds like a whole other layer to being like, oh, I don't like this place isn't for me, and I'm here to, I'm here to say that it is a space for bi people, for bi plus people, and I can probably say that like I am bisexual, and that's something that I am open about. People that might not be like the first thing that people see when they think of they like I'm also like proudly non-binary, and I'm engaged to a woman, things like that. So it's multifaceted, but I think that I'm hoping that I can, as a bi person, like at least ease that kind of worry for folks coming into the center that want case management, that like I'm here to affirm their queerness as a bi person myself. So I mean I hope that that can, you know, kind of ease the worry. But like I think that, you know, the folks that I have interacted with are, you know, they haven't really disclosed to me what their sexuality is, and I think that there's a lot there is a lot of worry around that. So, you know, anything that I can do to help, you know, ease that worry is really important to me as a bi person.
Yeah, it's interesting. You sort of mentioned that might not be the first thing that they recognize about you, and this is something that I've talked to Patrick at the center about, who introduced all of us initially. It's like you almost have to have the bat signal, right? We have the bi colors in the background of this right now. You know, I bought these pins recently. You know, I wear them to events because it's like that little sign of something that people can recognize you in the space and recognize those colors and understand that, you know, you're part of that bi plus community. And I've realized that you have to kind of wear it on your sleeve, because the circumstances to which you sort of appear in various spaces, whether it be to your doctor or whether it be to a social situation, you know, that might not be something that you can peg just by looking at someone. In fact, you probably can't peg it based on looking at someone, because the bi plus umbrella is so broad. You know, it's not tied to gender, it's not tied to physical appearance, it's not tied to, you know, the relationships that you have. So it's more complex, and you know, we talk about it like the center has bi plus artists and performers and all that all the time, but that may not be in their bio. So you may not know, for instance, oh, this person happens to be bi plus as part of their identity, because they're emphasizing other parts of their identity, which is also valid. And so you know, to that end, similarly, when it comes to resources for the community, it can sometimes be difficult to find it. So, Freddie, just a quick follow-up question here. You know, Dr. Rubin, for instance, works at an organization, Circle Care, which is very clearly reaching out to the LGBTQ plus community. But more broadly, I think in Connecticut, we're a little lucky that we do have a number of organizations that specifically target our community and specifically welcome our community. But like when I talk to people in groups, for instance, they don't always know how to find doctors that are welcoming or doctors that are affirming or have expertise working with our community. Do you have tips or recommendations of how to look these up? Because if you're looking for a new primary care physician, for instance, you might be trying to find it online, and you know, unless you're lucky and you trip across some like rainbow list of some sort, right? You may not necessarily know. So do you have any recommendations or how you get started when you're locating these resources?
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of like trying to expand, you know, every day, which is like really exciting. Why to be connected with Dr. Rubin here, because we often make referrals to Fairhaven Health, that has a really great LGBT team specifically for LGBT health, and we also make referrals to Anchor Health, which I know when I moved to Connecticut just last year, they're like just a simple Google search, like I found them right away. They're very, very like visible, which is really cool. It has been hard, and like you were saying, Josh, like we are like very blessed in Connecticut to have like all of these resources, because in the other places that I've lived, it's been harder to find LGBT care. So that's another thing, that's another part of my role, is that if people are intimidated about finding care, which I understand, because I've also been intimidated to find care, you know, because I mean, it's a very vulnerable, like your health is a very vulnerable topic for people. I'm also here to help navigate that system as well. So I would say that, you know, and also find like other options for folks that aren't necessarily in the New Haven area. That's what we're kind of hoping to do, is to expand more. And also I have a great contact at TCC. Shout out to Wendy if she's watching, who can also help in that part of the state as well. It's really all about what I'm learning for Connecticut is it's all about who you know. And I'm grateful to, you know, I've only been in this job for a few months, and I'm just like kind of growing my network every day. And so for folks that are looking for primary care, I can kind of point them in the right direction.
Yeah, it's great. And the thing that's sort of, I guess, the plus and the minus about Connecticut is we're not a particularly large state, so it isn't difficult to get around per se if you have transportation, which it's not fair necessarily to assume that everybody does. So that's something that to also keep in mind as well. But we do have resources in different parts of the state as well. So, you know, Dr. Rubin is down towards Fairfield County. You know, we have certainly things up in Hartford, but there's definitely a lot of access available throughout the state of Connecticut. So that's really helpful. And again, something that we're kind of lucky about that you don't necessarily see in other parts of the country because of sort of their geographic landscape. Dr. Rubin, one of the things that I'm curious about, and I think, you know, might present an interesting challenge about our community is that the knowledge and sort of things that we get to know and has been evolving very quickly, right? The number, obviously the community itself has evolved over the past, you know, 30 to 40 years. Things like HIV has evolved quite rapidly over 30 to 40 years. Someone posted in the chat, for instance, that they noticed something about an HIV vaccine trial coming up. So how do you keep up to date about what's happening in our community and being able to continue to provide that top-notch quality of care for our community? Because I'm sure there's just constantly new things coming out that you have to verse yourself with.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I stay current by being a member of the GLMA and a few other groups that focus on LGBT plus healthcare. And basically, a lot of the conferences that I attend, though they're infectious disease oriented, always have topics related to specialized care, again, related to the community. So yeah, we're very cutting edge on a lot of what we do, and in terms of our approach to sexuality and gender, and you know, the appropriateness of care based on what people's needs are. So yeah, and it's evolving. Even the terminology in medicine now, you know, talking about the different terms in identification of patients rapidly is evolving over time, and we have to stay current with that to make people feel as comfortable as possible when they enter our center.
Absolutely. Let's take a moment to transition over to some of the comments that are currently flowing in. And just a reminder that you can ask questions at any point, and we on the panel will definitely make our best effort to answer them. But I did want to note a couple of comments here. Paige McLaughlin, speaking to the point of finding resources, said that the Trevor Project is where they started, and then ultimately came in touch with other members of the community when they came out and was able to use that. Personal reference does seem to be a pretty strong way to get health resources. So if you do have those networks within the community, I do know that some of the groups within the Pride Center, for instance, actually built their own sort of list of doctors. I was really impressed with the one that one of our trans meeting groups was doing, because they sort of wanted to sort of speak firsthand about the doctors that they had great experiences with, because then they know that they could feel comfortable recommending that doctor to other people. So that's really, I do know in the Biplus community that sometimes is a challenge because the network isn't as strong. But if you do have members of the community that you connect with, absolutely. And then Deb, I really liked what you said here about one of the challenges in seeking healthcare is the judgment seen on the face of a provider. And then a follow-up comment, we are human first. I really love that. And yeah, I mean, I've unfortunately, through the social and support group, heard some horror stories. This whole panel came together because we were talking in March, and one of the people sort of said that they had, for the first time, to a doctor they had been regularly seeing for years and had no issues prior to that point, they had identified themselves as Biplus for the first time on the intake form, and an examination that they had in the past without issue suddenly had an issue, and then found out from another person who had done the same thing, had the same issue with the same doctor. And so someone that they had put a lot of trust in for years suddenly betrayed them in their mind. And so, you know, that's definitely part of the challenge. And that's sort of why I started off by asking about sort of the balance between obviously offering information that can help in providing the best possible care, because issues can be addressed based on, your history, And then also obviously the challenge in revealing that information because you feel like you've been hurt in the past, and so the trust level is just not there. And so I think part of the reason why it's important to know that there are organizations that offer this kind of care and a no judgment formula for care is exactly that people can feel comfortable going in, being able to be completely open and honest. Because we look at this, I'm going to rattle off some statistics. I promised I was going to do that earlier. The Biplus community has higher rates of anxiety, depression, and mood disorders, higher levels of sexualization, lower levels of social support, that social network, right? Higher levels of intimate partner violence, higher rates of sexual harassment, frequently mocked when being identifying as pansexual, omnisexual, or fluid by the larger public who just simply doesn't understand it, and frankly doesn't understand bisexuality to begin with. Oh, it's a phase, right? You hear that all the time, or people don't understand it. So, there's so many dominoes that get knocked over along the way, and it just becomes very difficult. And so I think that's part of the reason why these conversations are so important, because it's important to air these issues out and understand them. And so, Freddie, to that end, can we talk about the mental health aspect of this a little bit? The Biplus community, I think in part has more sort of mental health struggles because of sort of the shunning of their identity and the shunning of who they are, right? And again, it may not be their only part of who they are, but it is still who they are. And so how do you, I don't know if you work through these issues as part of what you do, but like, how do you sort of help them get on the right path if they're struggling?
Yeah, I think that a lot of people just haven't been listened to. That's what it comes down to, is that there's a lot of people that just have not been listened to, from providers, from therapists, from like all sorts of things. And I think that's my number one job, is just to listen, because getting all of it out is just like, it's such like a healthy mechanism. And from there, I mean, I love what you said about how folks have been kind of like bringing together like a list of providers that they know are good. That's something that I have been building out with help from Facebook, actually. Social media has a lot of bad qualities, but a lot of really, I mean, it's been like astronomical to me since coming out as bisexual, as trans. And Connecticut has some like really great Facebook groups where you can just kind of look up like, hey, like, what doctor would you recommend for this? What therapist would you recommend for this? And it's been a really, really great resource. And so what I usually do is when folks are expressing the need like for therapy, I kind of go to my Facebook groups and I say like, hey, like I'm looking for a therapist for this, individual with these needs, with this insurance, and kind of see what I can get from there. And then I also give those providers a call and kind of, suss out, kind of have like a screening for them to make sure that, that they, to put it bluntly, know what they're talking about, because that can be sort of like an issue with some providers. So, it is a struggle, it is a journey, but like that's the approach that I have been kind of taking since starting this job. Like there are some really incredible folks in Connecticut that that I've been able to refer people to, and that I've been kind of like building up the network. And I really just like I'm learning like more and more from this job that like all we have is each other. When governments fail, when local governments fail, when state governments fail, like it's all about it's like what the commenter said, we're all human first, and we are just here for each other. So that's, yeah, I think that's kind of like the process that I have. Yeah.
Absolutely. A couple more comments have been coming in as we've been talking. Mikey from Chicago joining us. And this is actually one of the things I did want to emphasize as well, because it's sort of building on sort of the resources and being there for each other. One thing that's happened as a result of the pandemic that's been incredibly beneficial is that resources that would be boxed in to a local community because you had to physically go there in person have been unlocked when you've had virtual conversations like this, right? So while we have 3 groups meeting in Connecticut, there are groups meeting in all parts of the country. So if you're feeling alone, you don't have to wait for the 3 groups in Connecticut to cycle because we all meet once a month, right? You can attend a virtual meeting in New York or Chicago or Minneapolis or all of these other locations where these groups are meeting. And so that can unlock the ability to talk with other people. It can build your network across the country. You can have more people that are there for you. Obviously that doesn't work when it comes to the physical health side of things because you need to be able to get to a doctor, but even telehealth now exists. And I know Circle Care Center is doing telehealth appointments as part of their offering. So you don't necessarily have to come into the office depending on what the appointment is for, right? So maybe let's transition to that. And then I have a question, Dr. Rubin, to follow up on that. But let's start with telehealth. Can you talk us a little bit about the telehealth option that you're currently offering and what that includes?
Yeah, sure. And actually, that's a byproduct of our COVID experience. We initiated that at the onset of COVID so that we could stay in touch with our patients that we already had established at the center. And it was a great tool to maintain that relationship. And then over time, we've started adding newer patients as well through telehealth. However, we focus on inpatient care because we feel that's really the most effective way. I mean, there's nothing like a face-to-face meeting with a provider and obviously a provider and a patient so that you can really get a full feel for that person. So really, we use telehealth mostly now to provide care when a patient can't get in, or for some reason, there's a concern about COVID and contagion, that kind of thing. So we do limit it, but basically it has expanded the scope of our activities. And for patients who may not be in town, who need a follow-up, we'll help them that way. So yeah, it's been a good adjunct to our services.
Absolutely. And depending on the type of sort of patient care that's required, those touch points can be very important. So having that
Exactly.
opportunity when you can't get into the office is certainly helpful to
Sure.
maintain that relationship for sure. We have a couple of not necessarily Biplus specific questions, but since we do have the questions in here, let's also address them too. So Paige was asking if you could talk a bit about PrEP. You did mention that as one of the services that Circle Care offers. The Biplus community can certainly benefit from this as well. It's
Sure.
not just a gay man's sort of product, obviously. So can you talk a little bit about PrEP and how it can benefit the community as well?
Well, actually, it's interesting. Just as a segue to your point, it's not really about a label; it's about an activity. So, if a person is having same-sex contact and there's body fluid being obviously, shared in the mix, then PrEP is a very important, very important protection in discordant, gender, sex. It's also important too, but you have to know what your risks are in terms of these 2 activities. And again, so that comes down to an individual level as far as how we're evaluating patients. So it's very hard to give a blanket answer, but the truth of the matter is that that person's activity will define whether they're really a candidate or not.
Right. And just to bring up some more statistics to kind of back that up, there is sort of been studies about Biplus physical health, and one of the things that's been tied to risk of poorer health is more risky sexual behaviors. And obviously, again, then you pair that with not sort of discussing that with your doctor. That's a challenging pairing, right? Like when it comes to the risk you're putting yourself in. But even beyond that, there's just other stressors that can get in there. Other things like STIs, pregnancy, like all of this is kind of on the table when it comes to
Right.
but again, depending on the person's specific activities. So, it's not to say that every Biplus person is promiscuous. We obviously want to dismiss that myth and all of the other myths that we know aren't true about the bi community as a whole. But the person's individual risk factors will be determined by their activities, right? So, it's important to know that so you can offer the proper care. And then I did want to, if we can bring Bindu's comment back up, I did want to come back to that also. Bindu, who's a great friend of ours as well, sort of noted the Pride Center community and New Haven Queer Exchange were good resources to also get recommendations. So that's really helpful. And thank you for that, Bindu. Freddie, so one of the things out of the statistics that I was just sort of reading is that you end up with sort of a double discrimination situation there. And that can definitely sort of create a challenge because you're getting discriminated by the heterosexual community who doesn't necessarily understand what's going on, and even the LGBTQ community who sort of pushing back on your identity. And so that can lead to isolation and loneliness. And so we were talking earlier about sort of resources and listening and so forth. When it comes to sort of the community as a whole, we are coming up into Pride Month. And so sometimes the benefit of Pride Month is there's a lot more activities that are going to be out there. One of the things I did want to mention about Pride Month, not to self-promote and do that when the center, we are going to have a day of action on June 12th. Our keynote for that day of action will actually be someone from the Biplus community. So we definitely encourage everybody to come to the keynote and obviously participate in all of the Pride Month activities that'll be happening across the state. But do you leverage some of the activities that are happening? Because this Pride in Connecticut is now like June through October. I think there's like something going on every week. I know that there's Pride in the Park down in Norwalk on the 11th, for instance. There's a whole list of it. It's going to be very difficult to rattle all of it off at this point. But do you leverage some of those opportunities, because that does bring sort of a lot of the community together, and there tends to be some benefits from that?
Yeah, I mean, I am more of the curating like groups. I kind of see the events and things to our programming staff. But the exciting thing is that just this year alone, we've, I think, tripled our staff capacity. And so, which is amazing. So I think that there should be a lot more to come in terms of, Biplus programming, and also, other types of programming as well. I mean, what's really cool about it too is that the folks from the community are really stepping up to create groups. Like just yesterday, my dear friend Emma started a YouTube discussion group where they'll be discussing different like short queer films that are on YouTube, free to watch. And so we just started that yesterday. It's going to be like a monthly group, and that was an idea born from Emma, who is a person out in the community. So I'm seeing like a lot of potential for even more even more programming that's not necessarily just the prides of the various prides of the different cities in Connecticut, although those are obviously like really exciting events as well. So there's a lot coming. I think there's like a lot of potential that's coming, and our programming curators have been working really hard to kind of create that, and also people from the community have really been stepping up. So definitely a lot more to come that I'm not necessarily like in charge of, but
absolutely, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Well, one of our community members actually sets up a Biplus table at certain Pride events and gives out little trinkets, just to sort of allow for visibility, right? So like now you have people who can like come and get like a wristband or a I want to say necklace, but it's not a bracelet. I guess it's a necklace, bead necklace, right? Like with the different bisexual colors or pansexual colors, little pins, things like that. And again, it's the bat signal, right? It's just being able to show off that little moment, a little bit of pride, to be able to sort of allow a little bit of visibility in a place that can be full of other sorts of colors and rainbows and things like that. And so, I think that's certainly one of those aspects that can be beneficial, because then you do start to see your tribe a little bit, right? And you have the ability to network and make friends and so forth. We had a situation where for like, I would say college age students 1 month showed up to the support group. We were still meeting in person before the pandemic, and all 4 of them, they never met each other, but they traded phone numbers and so forth because they had such a good time chatting together. And the last time I heard from them, they're like, "Oh yeah, we're all best of friends." It's like, and that happens because you have the ability to bring people together in various settings. Um, whether it be, the pride events, whether it be social and support events, programming, special programming where people can meet in person or even virtually in their little cubes on Zoom. There's all sorts of ways that people can kind of get to know each other and hopefully really benefit. I think one of the challenges is the Biplus community is just behind the curve when it comes to some of the rest of the LGBTQ community in forming their network and having these things. Like I look at what the trans community has been able to do over the past few years with the resources that they've developed inside their own community, and unfortunately, it was out of a place of necessity at times, right? They sort of said, we're not going to wait for other people to do this; we're going to do this ourselves. But the fact that happened sort of started a snowball effect that just added more and more and more things, and it really adds to the ability for the community to support each other. And so, the hope is that we can do the same thing as the BiPlus community, and with things like this and the programming that we do and the events that we do, and then the regular meetings that we have. So Dr. Rubin, I'll kind of shift it back to you for another question here.
Sure.
When you are meeting with patients, I'm sure that there are times when you sort of can see the sort of a scenario where they might be holding back something or they might be struggling. Are there things that you as an organization or yourself as a doctor are sometimes able to do to sort of improve the comfort level? Especially for newer patients who may be still getting to know you and Circle Care Center. I'm sure that that's something that you have to work through quite a bit. Especially for patients that have had rough goes at other sort of doctors' offices and so forth. What are some of the things that you do to sort of make them feel more welcome and at home?
Well, I think we start in our waiting room. Our waiting room is very welcoming to all individuals of the rainbow. Basically, to show the flag, so to speak, that we're very welcoming and non-judgmental to such individuals coming into our center. So I think we established that tone right away, and our reception staff also is very welcoming and orients the patient to what our services are. And once they come into the exam room, they can see that all of our folks here are focused on the individual, focused on what the needs of that person are. And I think that information flows because of that.
Mhm.
Also, I want to add that I didn't mention before that we do have a mental health component to our services as well. We have an LCSW that we refer to in-house, who's very important to our services in supporting what we do, doing counseling for all different individuals, and he's a very important resource. So I just wanted to share that too.
That's really good to know, and I think that's also really underscores sort of the approach that's needed in our community, because mental and physical wellness can sometimes go hand in hand, because
Right.
if you're feeling good mentally, you're probably also taking you're able to take care of yourself in a different way physically than if you're not, for instance.
Exactly.
So that's a really good thing. And the other thing too, and this sort of came up earlier, but someone posting that they're LGBTQ friendly is not the same thing as someone is actually being immersed and comfortable in LGBTQ issues and sort of the various permutations of things that need to come up. So when we were talking earlier about how you also are versed in those topics, that can be helpful as your
Right.
ability to sort of work with them. Paige raises an interesting question that may be a good sort of final big question for the panel as we start to wind down here. So if we pop that back up, how about mental wellness issues? Often people may have problems with mental health, not just directly related to orientation or gender. And that's certainly a good point. You could have mental wellness issues that have nothing to do with your orientation. It could just be sort of broader. So I think starting with what you just said, Doctor, having that ability to refer someone in so that there's ability to have a more comprehensive program is probably a good first step.
Oh, absolutely. And it's part of the integration of these issues into just general healthcare and preventive healthcare. And I think that empowers the patient to feel that they're really taking control of their health by having both the physical, health and mental health components together in terms of being empowered about their health care. But yeah, based on what you had just read about what the questioner said, there is a very big difference between somebody being informed about LGBT issues and actually somebody who helps the patient be empowered through that identity to control their health care. And we do that. I mean, that's something we're dedicated to at our center.
Absolutely. And Freddie, just kind of the pass the question next to you.
Yeah.
I'm sure that sometimes the mental wellness issues that come up aren't just because of a person's identity or orientation. It can be because of personal issues. It can be because of life situations. So I'm
Right.
sure that that's something that that has to be unpacked as part of the broader conversation.
Absolutely. And I think like the thing with the thing that's so important about like LGBT specific clinics, like the one that Dr. Rubin works in, is that baseline, that you'll be respected. Like that is the baseline, is that like that is how every healthcare or every therapist should be, is that baseline, that you will come in and you'll feel respected for who you are. And that is just like, that is a bar that is not met by a lot of providers. It's really unfortunate. Like I once had a client call me and say, I need a therapist, but I don't, and I'm secure in my gender identity, and I do not want them to say them to doubt me. I don't want them to say I like anything about that. I want to talk about other things in my life and have my gender identity completely respected. And like that's something that it's unfortunate that we have to even say these things. Like, it's unfortunate that we have to be like, I want a baseline of respect when I go into a doctor's office, so that I feel comfortable enough to talk about other things that are going on in my life that are contributing to my mental health or my physical health. It's unfortunate that we have to say these things, but
adding to that, basically, respect engenders trust. Because trust is probably the most important element of the doctor-patient relationship or the provider-patient relationship. Without that trust, you really don't have the ability to help that patient. Yeah, it should, as you're saying, Freddie, it should be a given that respect to that individual is a given, and unfortunately, it's not always a given.
And more importantly, if the patient doesn't trust the doctor and the doctor doesn't respect the patient, how can the care ever reach the level that it should for the person to be properly taken care of, right? And from the doctor's perspective, they don't respect you, so therefore they're not going to explore all the things they need to make sure that if you need certain care or certain medication or whatever the case may be, they're never going to get there, and the patient's never going to reveal what they need to get that help. And so that's just they're going to be part of that statistic that we want to avoid to begin with. And so yeah, I think that foundation is so critical. And I've heard really great stories about patients that have found incredible doctors, and I definitely think that the organizations focused on our community are doing a lot of things right to offer those services in a way that's respectful and accessible and ensures that level of care can be met. And unfortunately, mostly from the more standardized care perspective, I've heard some horror stories, not necessarily constantly, but you definitely hear those moments, and it sort of gives you pause, for the simple reason that you don't want to find yourself in that situation. You don't want your friend in that situation. You don't want anybody in that situation. And so it sort of forces you to take a harder look at these things. But I think the good news is that I think things have been improving. I think we have more organizations that are doing this, and they're doing it better because the research gets better and the knowledge gets better, and better decisions can be made, so the care gets better. And so if we want to sort of start to come in for a landing on a more positive note, I think the good news is that if you're in a position where you don't know of a doctor or you're not sure where to go, the resources are out there. And so this is going to be a great time for me to go one more time around the room to just ask everybody to tell them where they can find more information. So Dr. Rubin, let's start with Circle Care Center.
Yeah, we basically have the website, actually, I see on the screen there.
Yep.
And, we are in Norwalk, Connecticut. I'll publicize our office number is 203-852-9525. You can call for an appointment. And we also have a patient portal as well, but you can start basically with the website, and you'll get our basic entree information to start out, such as forms, filling out forms, etc.
Absolutely. And Freddie, when it comes to support groups or just resources in general, tell us a little bit about where they can find that.
Sounds good. Yeah, you can go to the website that's on the screen right now. You can also feel free to send me an email or a text or a phone call. All of that information is on the website. We also have a Google form if you want to have a case management appointment that you can also fill out on the website. If you don't want to fill out the form, that's also okay. You can just email or call or text me. The sessions are free. You can see me as many times as you want. Usually I have clients that come in maybe once a week or so. And I see everyone in the state, although most of my resources are in the greater New Haven area, but I work with people from all over the state. So if you're not able to come in person to the New Haven Pride Center, we can also set up a Zoom call or phone call.
Absolutely. And I'll throw a couple of extra resources in as a bonus here at the end. So the Biplus Social and Support Group meets the fourth Saturday of every month from 1:30 to 3 p.m. We are currently meeting virtually on Zoom, which means you can participate from wherever you happen to be. That information is published ahead of time in our group on Facebook, Bisexual Plus Connecticut. It's also published on meetup.com, so you can find the information to attend the meetings there. We also we'll be having more virtual programming like this as the year progresses, so definitely stay tuned. The Bisexual Plus Connecticut group in particular is going to be a great way for us to let you know that these are coming. Of course, you can follow the New Haven Pride Center as well. But I do want to thank Dr. Rubin as well, Dr. David S. Rubin, these full names here, and Freddie Swindal. Both of you, thanks for joining this panel today and for your time and for offering some great information for our viewers today.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Josh.
And let me bring Patrick back in so we can wind down this presentation.
Thank you again, Josh, for moderating today, and thank you to our amazing panelists. We're super thankful to continue to have these important conversations. This is, I think, part 4 of health equity focused programs that we have done, focusing on different parts of our community. And so it's exciting to be including the Biplus community as a chapter of that series. I do want to just echo what Josh mentioned, that we'll actually be sort of continuing this conversation on our June 12th keynote. And I will be happy to announce here first, before anybody else knows anywhere else, that our keynote that day is going to be Dr. Justin B. Terry Smith. He's a doctor of public health, and it's going to be, he's actually a attendee of our Biplus support and social group all the way from New Mexico. But he will be here physically with us in New Haven on June 12th to be our keynote for our Day of Justice focused on racial justice. And that keynote that day will be specifically on health equity within the LGBTQ rights and civil rights movement. So please consider joining us. That program will actually be in person. So join us at the University Theater at Yale, which is where we're going to be hosting that program. That said, we're super excited to also continue our Biplus programming and keep an eye out in the next couple weeks. We have a couple exciting programs that we're trying to nail down the speakers for. It's June month, so it's very hard to get anyone to commit. But also, I do want to pre-announce that our Day of Action in October will be specifically focused on the Biplus community as well. And the date for that is, Josh, do you remember? I think it's October 13th. Let's see if I'm right. No, October 16th. So with that, thank you all for joining us today. We are super excited, again, to continue these conversations and look forward to seeing you at our next program. Bye, y'all.